There is a question a small number of geneticists have been circling for years, and most of them are careful about how loudly they say it out loud. Not because it's dangerous, because it's almost too clean. In laboratories from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to Tel Aviv, to a climate-controlled archive in Leipzig, researchers have spent 2 decades doing something that was pure science fiction when your grandparents were born. They have been reading the DNA of the dead, pulling readable genetic code out of teeth and the dense bone of the inner ear, bone that sat in the ground for 3,000 years. And when they lined that ancient code up against the living peoples of the world, one comparison kept returning a result they had to run again to believe. They took the DNA of the Jewish people, one of the oldest continuously recorded nations on earth, and measured it against every great civilization of the ancient world: the Egyptians, the Romans, the Babylonians, the Phoenicians, the Greeks. Empire after empire after empire. And only one of them came back as a genuine match. Only one. This is the story of that single match, what it is, how one genetic thread survived when almost every other ancient bloodline on the planet quietly dissolved, and what it reveals about who the Jewish people actually are and where they truly began. If you're the kind of person who has ever looked at an old photograph, or a map, or your own reflection and wondered where you really come from, subscribe to Bloodlines and Borders. This entire channel is built for that question. Because to understand why one result stunned the people who found it, you first have to understand something genuinely unsettling about DNA. Most of the ancient world is gone, not just its cities and its languages, its blood. Here is the thing almost nobody tells you about ancestry. Empires don't only fall politically, they fall genetically. We imagine bloodlines as permanent, that if a people built pyramids or ruled the Mediterranean, some unbroken line must still run from them to someone alive today. The ancient DNA revolution has spent 20 years quietly demolishing that idea. Take Rome, the eternal city, the empire that swallowed the known world. In 2019, a team publishing in the journal Science sequenced skeletons spanning nearly 12,000 years around Rome, and what they found is that the genetic makeup of the city didn't just shift over the centuries. It transformed, almost completely, more than once. The Romans of the early Republic and the Romans of the late Empire were genetically close to 2 different populations. Waves of migration, conquest, and slavery poured new ancestry into the city and diluted what came before until the original signal all but vanished. The people living in Rome today are not, in any clean genetic sense, the descendants of the Romans who built the Colosseum, now the Phoenicians, the master sailors who spread their alphabet across the ancient sea. Researchers recovered the remains of a young Phoenician man from Carthage, and when they read his maternal DNA, it didn't point back to the Levant, where the Phoenicians began. It pointed to Europe. Their genetic legacy scattered so widely and mixed so thoroughly that it effectively dissolved into the coastlines they touched. The Philistines, yes, the Philistines of the Bible, show the same thing. A 2019 study traced a wave of European-related ancestry arriving with them in the early Iron Age, and then watched it fade. Within roughly 2 centuries, that distinct signal had blended into the surrounding population until it became almost invisible. Even Egypt, 3,000 years of continuous civilization, the most stubborn culture in the ancient world, shows only partial, diluted continuity between the people of the pharaohs and the people of the Nile today. See the pattern. Absorption, replacement, dilution. Empire after empire, the biological thread connecting the living to the ancient simply snaps. The monuments outlast the bloodlines. That is the normal fate of an ancient people. That is what is supposed to happen. So picture the experiment. You have the genomes of the ancient world, Bronze Age skeletons from Canaan, Iron Age remains from the Near East, ancient Egyptians, Romans, Anatolians, dozens of populations, and you have the living Jewish people, scattered by 2,000 years of exile across 3 continents. By every rule we just described, this comparison should have failed. 2,000 years of diaspora, expulsions from more than 100 places, communities that hadn't seen each other's faces in 1,000 years, Jews from the mountains of Yemen, from the cities of Poland, from the old quarters of Baghdad and Morocco and Spain. If Rome couldn't hold its genetic signal together, living in one city, what chance did a people scattered to the ends of the earth have of holding on to anything at all? And yet, when researchers compared those far-flung Jewish communities to each other, they found something they did not expect. Underneath all the local differences, underneath 1,000 years of separation, Ashkenazi Jews from Europe, Sephardi Jews from the Mediterranean, and Mizrahi Jews from the Middle East all shared a common genetic core, a shared signature. As if, no matter how far the branches had grown apart, they were all reaching back toward the same trunk. And that raised the question that made people run their data twice. Where exactly is that trunk? Here's where it gets stranger, so stay with me, because this is the part the headlines never explain properly. When that shared Jewish genetic core was measured against the ancient populations, it did not scatter across the map. It did not point to Europe, where Ashkenazi Jews had lived for 1,000 years. It did not point to the many lands of the diaspora. It pointed over and over with a consistency that unsettled the researchers to one place. The ancient Levant, the Bronze Age soil of Canaan, the Iron Age Near East, the exact stretch of land where the Israelites first appear in the historical record. In 2020, a study in the journal Cell sequenced the genomes of people who lived in the southern Levant during the Bronze Age, roughly the world of the earliest biblical narrative. And when they compared those ancient genomes to living populations, modern Jewish communities emerged carrying a substantial, direct inheritance from those Bronze Age Levantines. The thread that snapped for Rome, for the Phoenicians, for the Philistines, for the Jewish people, it held. That is the one match, not a metaphor, not a legend, a measurable, statistically stubborn genetic line running from the ancient Near East through 2,000 years of exile into the DNA of living people you could pass on the street tomorrow. Now I have to be honest with you, because this channel does not deal in fairy tales. This does not mean Jewish DNA is somehow pure, and it does not mean Jews are the only people who carry ancient Levantine ancestry. They are not. Many other peoples of the region, including Levantine, Arab populations, and the Samaritans, descend from those same ancient roots. This is a shared river, not a private stream. The Levant never belonged to one people alone. But here is what makes the Jewish case so rare. Most peoples who stayed on their ancestral land slowly absorbed newcomers until the ancient signal blurred. The Jewish people did the opposite of what almost every other nation did. They left, scattered further than almost anyone in history, and still carried the signal intact. Continuity usually requires staying put. They achieved continuity while being exiled to the ends of the earth. That is the thing that shouldn't be possible. So how? How does a bloodline survive what erased everyone else's? The answer is not mystical. It's human, and almost stubborn in its simplicity. The first reason is a founder effect. Many Jewish communities were rebuilt, again and again, from small groups of survivors. And when a population passes through a narrow bottleneck like that, the genetic signature of those few founders gets locked in and amplified in every generation that follows. Their DNA becomes the community's fingerprint, but the biology alone doesn't explain it, and here is the turn most people miss. Genetics kept the record. But culture protected the genetics. For 2,000 years, in country after country, Jewish communities largely married within the community, not out of hostility to their neighbors, but as an act of preservation, a way to keep a covenant, a language, a calendar, and a memory alive while living as a minority, often under pressure, sometimes under threat of death. Every wedding was, without anyone intending it as such, an act of genetic conservation. Faith, in the most literal sense, kept the bloodline coherent. The Sabbath candles and the marriage canopy did what Rome's legions could not do for Rome. They held a people together across time. And so the DNA became a kind of witness, a biological archive that quietly corroborates the written one. When the genetic data points a Jewish family from a village in Lithuania back to the Iron Age Near East, it is telling the same story their prayers told for 100 generations, that they came from somewhere specific, that they remembered it, and that the memory was true. Think back to where we started. Rome fell, and its blood scattered. The Phoenicians sailed the world and dissolved into it. The Philistines faded in 2 centuries. Great civilization after great civilization left us monuments and lost their bloodlines to time. That is the ordinary way of things. And then there is the exception. A people expelled, scattered, hunted, and dispersed to 3 continents, who should by every rule have vanished into the populations around them, and who instead carried a 3,000-year-old thread all the way into a laboratory in the 21st century, where a machine read it and confirmed what they had been saying about themselves the entire time. That is what the one match really means. Not superiority, not purity, something quieter and honestly more moving. It means memory can outlive empires. It means a people can lose everything, their land, their temple, their safety, and still not lose themselves. And if you are sitting there wondering whether this ancient thread runs through your own blood, I made something to help you find out. It is a discovery kit called Your Jewish Roots, a guide and workbook that shows you how to read your own DNA results, your surname, and your family's oldest habits for the fingerprints of this exact inheritance. It is linked in the description and pinned at the top of the comments, if the question will not leave you alone. So here is what I want to know from you. What is the oldest thing you actually know about your own family? The furthest back name, place, or story that has been handed down to you? Leave it in the comments. Some of you are carrying threads older than you realize. And if this is the kind of history you wish they had taught you in school, subscribe and stay with me, because in the next investigation, we take one single branch of this family tree, the Ashkenazi Jews, and compare their DNA against every nation in Europe. The result was, frankly, impossible. But that is a story for next time.